I think one of the biggest conversion killers is having a slow speed of the website, because
Right,
I've literally seen websites drop in leads and conversions and in traffic because their speed was just poor,
right.
and you improve the speed and you're like, that's so, you should do this, right? You should have it. And a lot of times people have a certain device, they might have a fast connection of their on their device. The website has been cached. Maybe they've come to it before. They're like, no, it runs pretty quickly for me. But in Google's eyes, it's not about how it's running for you. It's about the signals, that the vitals that they have with
Yeah.
with the tools that they use to say, oh no, your speed score is 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever, for mobile, and then 60% for out of 100 for desktop. I hope so.
Hey everyone, Jamal here. So here's a wild stat for you. Most digital agencies from 2005 are extinct, just gone. But my guest today, Max, and his team at MOS Creative just posted a 21.6% conversion increase for a client in 30 days. 20 years in the game and still getting better results. So today we're reverse engineering 2 decades of survival and his systematic approach to growth. Max, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So, Max, I've got to start here. You left Morgan Stanley in 2004 to start MOS Creative. And look, we both know most agencies from that era are dead. The landscape has changed like 5 times since, but you're still here. You're still scaling. Walk me through the one decision in those early years that you now realize was basically your survival mechanism. Like, what did you do differently that kept you in the game?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. So a little bit of factual information. It was 2005 when I started the business. It was actually initially not a digital agency. It was more like a print management company. It was called Maximum Office Solutions. We then turned into a digital agency, I would say probably about 3 years or so later on.
Okay.
So very, very different business. The name kind of stayed the same because it was Maximum Office Solutions. So we took the MOS and added the creative because we were, gearing to go into digital space. It was initially started website design and development, and then it started really expanding into digital services like SEO, content creation, video animation, and then obviously we grew into actually building software and applications as well. So really, clients come to us different stages, startups and growing companies. Really, the main goal, the main keyword I would say is growth. If their growth mindset, uh, we want to work with them. So we have clients that are just at idea stage. We help them plan out really what they're trying to build to make sure that it meets that goal, to make sure that it creates a good user experience. So we have clients from idea stage all the way to, hey, we're scaling up, we need additional help. Or we have clients like, hey, we've been in business for a while. We really want to understand what else we can do in the digital space to be able to be different amongst our competitors,
Right.
right? Where are they winning that we need to be, or where do we need to be to actually be winning? Um, what makes us different? I think one of the things kind of going back is because we didn't come, and I had a business partner at this point, because I didn't come from the digital marketing, digital space, or tech background. I was so actually I was an intern at Morgan Stanley. It wasn't even a full
Right.
time job. I was an intern,
Right.
and I was always looking to do something on my own as an entrepreneur. I knew I was an entrepreneur from the beginning, probably being immigrant. It was just kind of like the mindset that I always had. So I think because I didn't come from that background, it was easier to see how we could improve on a
Right.
regular basis. And still today, I mean, I'm still learning like this is how we can do better, right? Obviously, with AI coming into play, there's a lot of things that need to be learned on a regular basis. And if you're not evolving with it, like you said, you're gonna get stuck. Which is sometimes being stuck is not the worst thing. It's not like, oh my God, I'm being stuck. It's just really understanding. Like I'm listening to a really good podcast, and they're talking about if you're stuck at a certain point, it's not always about the business. It's also about your mindset.
Yes, it is. I agree.
You know, so I always try to improve my mindset as well. And I don't try to block it off and saying, well, my business is not doing well, or we're not providing the right service. It's like, am I not aligned with where we're trying to go? And how do I need to change my mindset so I can actually share that same mindset with my employees, right? To be able to get us to the next level.
Got it.
So it's working on myself. It's working on the business. Obviously, being open to new things that are new things, meaning like what can help with, for example, I mean SEO. Everybody's like, oh, SEO is dead. SEO is not dead. SEO is not going to be dead because actually, if you see a lot of the ranking that happen in AI search today, they're coming from SEO.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, so if you have good search engine optimization structure on your website or your Google Maps, you're most likely 99% are ranking at the top of AI search.
Yeah, yeah, no, got it. And then that's really interesting. So correct me if I'm wrong. You were actually the first marketing firm in Baltimore to launch mobile sites, right?
Correct.
Yeah,
We
okay. So
actually,
that,
the reason why we launched it is because we built a platform. So my business partner and I built a platform a while back. If you remember when mobile sites came out, when smartphones came out, mobile sites were M dot. That was the
yes.
URL. Yeah. And then they were separate websites. They weren't responsive where they would respond from larger to smaller screens. So we built a platform specifically for ourselves to speed up the process again of improving, right, our process so that we could turn projects quicker and give different experience, better experience on a smartphone device when people already had websites on their desktops and laptops. So we built a
Okay.
platform for ourselves. We created, then we kind of separated into a separate company, that
Right.
platform. And MOS Creative was obviously, since that's the company that was building it, we created our own mobile website. So we were like the first company specifically in Baltimore area to do this. So we got a
Okay.
write
So,
up. Yeah,
but Max, that's not luck, right? That's like pattern recognition. So, how do you consistently spot these shifts before they become obvious to everyone else? Like, what's your process for seeing what's around the corner?
wrong also on some things like, oh, I think this is going to happen. It didn't happen. I think it's also kind of having confidence to a certain, you have to have confidence in everything that you do, right? Doesn't matter if you're selling something, releasing a new product, and being open to figuring out, okay, maybe it's not exactly how I envisioned it, but having the confidence to be able actually to take that first step and then being open and not just like, no, no, I fell in love with this idea. This is the only way it's going to work, but being open to also listening to feedback and knowing when to take the turn or pivot to adjust it to what it needs to be. Just like a business, you're starting a business,
Yeah, yeah.
all these projections that you get, you invested as a VC, all these projections. I mean, it's nothing but fluff, right? Like
This is
everybody's giving
fluff.
you these, yeah,
Always.
everybody's giving you these numbers. You're
I
like,
don't think
oh,
I've ever seen a business plan and a financials that they actually delivered or stick to either
right.
above overachieved or underachieved. But you got to put something down, right? Because that's just the methodology.
But the same factor amongst the people that just have those numbers and the people that deliver with confidence, right, is critical because if they deliver with
Yes.
confidence, you believe them. Like that makes sense. It might be the craziest numbers in the world, but if you see like no, no, I can see that spark in your eye. I feel it, right? That's very hard to teach, right? And coming back to your question, like how do we do this? We didn't know better, right? We came in. Yes, it's good to have experience. It's good to know how to improve. But sometimes when you step in, and it can be very, very scary because you don't have this previous experience, you're just like you're a blank slate. You start doing it. Yes, you make mistakes. We all make mistakes. Doesn't matter even if you're experienced. But if you understand, all right, this mistake is really hurting, and you know your numbers, then it's a lot easier to be able to adjust.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. A lot of agencies react. You almost seem to anticipate. And that's probably why you've evolved from Web 1.0 to mobile to SaaS to even Web 3 projects now. Okay, so let's get into a read for a minute, okay? Because this is where it gets really interesting. Your recent case study, yeah, the 21.6 conversion. increase in 30 days. Most agencies would just throw that stat out, um, and out there and just keep it vague, right? We increase conversions. Cool story. Um, but you broke it down into three core principles: clarity over creativity, friction elimination, and trust acceleration. So let's unpack that. Give me the real implementation here, starting with clarity over creativity, because that's almost counterintuitive. Designers hate that phrase, right? Uh, um, Give me a before and after example where you actually removed design elements and then conversions went up.
Yeah. So let me take it back a little bit. That client, we've been working with them for, I want to say at this point, probably 6, 7 years. It's a big childcare association
Right.
in around the area where the Baltimore, Maryland, Washington D.C. area. Not obviously the sexiest space, right? But it's needed. I think, just also to be honest, I think there's some factors, not just only what we did. We just structured it properly for the time when it was needed.
Right.
Because, so COVID, obviously, right? A lot of people work remotely. Our goal at this point, so they, actually, let me take it a little further. They didn't even have, when we started working with them, they didn't really even have a website. They had 10 locations, pretty big association, had no website. They brought us in. They're like, hey, listen, we need to create digital strategy. We need to create a website. We need to integrate certain tools within our platform so that it's easier, so we can automate of how our business runs. There's different directors with different locations, and then we want to make sure that it actually works. So obviously, the initial step was we created a website. Then we created all the locations for like Google Map locations, Google Business Profile locations for every location. Obviously, constantly reiterated of as Google was changing as well, and now with AI, to teach Google AI specifically about each location, even though some locations are similar, right? But on a website, you don't want to have exactly the same content for every
Yeah.
location
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's not going to be good, right? So it was constantly so talking about how to take some of the creative is just to simplify it, not being creative in terms of, hey, here's how we creatively different. To simplify it, to explain it for a parent that, hey, I was working remotely from home. Now I have to go to the office. I have to choose pretty quickly where to take my child. Here's the
Yeah.
breakdown and the value of why I should go there,
Yeah.
right?
Got it. And that connects to friction elimination, right? So here's my question. What's the number one conversion killer you see repeatedly that founders just don't recognize? Like they think it's fine, but you look at it and immediately know it's bleeding revenue.
Well, I think one of the biggest conversion killers is having a slow speed of the website because
Right.
that's a major factor with Google. I think it's actually gone even higher on the list of factors. Before it was like top five. I think now it's like top three. I've literally seen websites drop in leads and conversions and in traffic because their speed was just poor, you know. And you improve the speed, and you're like, that's so you should do this, right? You should have it. And a lot of times, people have a certain device. They might have a fast connection of their on their device. The website has been cached. Maybe they've come to it before. You know, it's quick connection. They're like, no, it runs pretty quickly for me. But in Google's eyes, it's not about how it's running for you, right? It's about the signals that the vitals that they have with
Yeah.
with the tools that they use to say, oh no, your speed score is 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever for mobile, and then 60% for out of 100 for desktop.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Um, and the trust acceleration piece, because trust markers are tricky, right? Everybody knows they need testimonials, security badges, whatever. But placements matter. How do you systematically figure out where trust markers should actually go versus where designers want to put them for aesthetic reasons?
I don't think there's not always like just the perfect answer for every website. Certain industries, where they need to be, what people expect, right? Because when we're designing, like people always ask us, when we're creating a website or an application, well, do you work with B2B? Do you work with B2C? Do you work with B2G, which is business to government? I'm like, listen, there's still a human making the decision. So the main thing is you have to understand what are the human needs of that business or product that you're selling, and figure out as they're scrolling down. Because obviously the goal is, let's say if it's a website, you land usually above the fold, you're seeing information. Why would they want to keep scrolling? If that call out that you're telling, let's say this to a founder, here's how I'm able to help you, and you being this specific type of founder, if it's a SaaS company, if it's e-commerce company, if you're working with e-commerce company, you're able to help them with this, and not like 15 things, but like something specific. All right, this intrigues me. This is what I was searching for. So again, if they're searching for that specific key phrase, and it's also in a hero, and that connected the dots, so I'm on the right page, I will be intrigued to keep on scrolling down. And then you're thinking about psychologically, right? If I keep on scrolling down, what else do I want to see? Now that I've connected with them, what else do I want to see? Do I want to see maybe because I'm a new company, what type of results I've gotten? Do I want to see what companies maybe have big names that I've worked with to show to show right underneath the hero banner? Do I want to show certain case studies where I want to lead into the case study? Because again, depending, like for agencies, case studies is big, right? It's like, what have you done? Let me see your work. Usually it's how does it look? What are the results? Let's talk. So that's kind of the psychology that usually drives the conversion or drives the attention.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you've got a repeatable framework here. This isn't guesswork. This is almost systematic optimization, right? Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's talk about the business side for a minute, because this is fascinating to me, right? MOS Creative serves SaaS companies, Web3 projects, real estate, education, pretty diverse portfolio, right? Most agencies either specialize hard in one vertical, or they spread too thin and become mediocre generalists. You've somehow maintained quality across all these verticals. How? I mean, what's your framework for that?
So again, it's kind of going back to the point of business to human, understanding really the human need of what they're expecting. I mean, we did an application for military families for what is called a POS, uh, permanent. So military families pretty much move. I forgot exactly what it stands for. Move from one base to the next base within the United States, and when they move, there's no there is some paperwork that they give within the military to prepare you and checklists, but there's no good application to kind of take them through it. So we got contacted by really good clients, Klein, and we created this application for them. There was a lot of questions that needed to be asked because we have no experience in specifically, this process. So obviously they're the ones that have experience. So it's just making sure that you spend the right time asking the right questions, right? You know, do you learn this right away when you ask questions? No, there's repeated questions that will come up, right? So our process, our framework is we plan, we design, we create a clickable prototype. So again, we're creating this flow for different users, user story flows, right? With actual design application before we go into development to make sure that that flow makes sense, to make sure that it's solving the problem. Again, same thing with designing a website, right? After we do that, and after it makes sense, and after they went to, I also recommend to a lot of our clients to go to their clients and gather feedback, like have a alpha beta group, gather feedback to make sure that it makes sense. This is how they would expect it. Make any changes within the design phase. Once the design phase is complete, then go into development. Because even once it's developed, there's going to be different requests that's going to come from other users as well.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes sense. Is client selection really important? Because I'm assuming that not everyone you can work with, and you have to say no to some. So is that qualification quite important for you?
Even though, we've had clients that obviously we always ask, what are you trying to build? What problem are you solving? Who is it for? Why do they need it? Who are your competitors, right? I have truly have heard some ideas that are just off the wall, and some of those ideas are like, there's no way this is going to work. Have actually worked very well, and some ideas that I thought, this is a great idea, they don't really meet the expectation because, again, that founder, it's very important to make sure who that founder is or the team and how they're going to drive it there. Because the idea might be as interesting or different as anything out there. If they really understood what that need is and they're able to pivot at any point, then they're going to be successful. If they've given up, then the business is going to die.
Yeah, yeah, that makes complete sense. According to LinkedIn, you've now got anywhere between 11 to 50 employees. Is that correct? Yeah, okay. So that's not a tiny team anymore. So what was the inflection point where you had to systemize, like where things started breaking and you realized, okay, we can't just wing this anymore? And what's the first system you put in place?
So SOPs, like they're important, I think, for a business to be able to grow and scale, but they're a little hard to always implement because let me give you a perfect example. Project managers, right? Project managers, to a certain extent, we want to have the same system for everyone, but you do need to a certain extent adapt to a client, right? How they like to communicate to make sure there's a good relationship. Majority of clients don't have an issue with this, but some clients are like, listen, here's how we're expecting, especially once you start getting into bigger clients, you know?
Right.
So it's very hard to say, well, here's an SOP specifically how you need to manage a client. And it's like, well, instead of just like we have all the software that we can possibly have to make sure the project is smooth. But if you have to spend more time to also make phone calls, explain in the phone call, and then also put it into the software, it's like, this is a little bit different than it was documented in standard operating procedures. But one of the first ones is definitely to make sure how information gets gathered, right? How we do onboarding. I think onboarding is critical because that's really when you establish, here's the terms, how we work,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, because if you lead the client and the project manager really is kind of like the main person, the main contact in every project. If they take the lead, which they need to take the lead to make sure that it's a good relationship, it's good communication, they probably have to repeat to the client several times to make because clients forget, we forget as humans. That is, I would say, the most important process.
Right. Well, here's what I noticed in your testimonials, which is the reason why I asked that question.
Mm-hmm.
You going above and beyond, which is great for reputation. It can also burn out teams if it's not systemized. So how do you create a level of excellence, a service excellence with your people working 80 hours a week? You can't, right? So I'd be interested in your view.
I mean, I don't think we work 80 hours a week. I have worked 80 hours a week, but try not to work 80 hours a week. Um, that's an interesting question. I'll be the first one to admit, I want to make sure obviously every client's happy. I want because not only like we've had clients that we've worked with us for 10 years, 12 years.
Right.
We build really good relationships. They're not just clients. They're like, it's easy. It's not just like, oh, hey, can you help me? I've had a client, really good also review. She found us online on one of the directories. She called us she had a web application that she needed built. She got screwed over by somebody. And she's like, why should I trust you? I said, listen, I know you don't know me. You don't have to trust me. I hope we develop this relationship that you can trust me. But I'm going to tell you what I would tell my mother, what I would hope somebody would tell me. And then you make a decision from this. So she did listen to me. She tried another company. Didn't work out. She came back. So 2 times it didn't work out. She came back. She's like, okay, let's do this. We'll work together. And then afterwards, she wrote a phenomenal review. She even wrote up like a full page write up. She's like, you should send this to your clients because I don't really believe how you approached made sense. But she's like, it's because she was cautious from her previous experiences.
Sure. Sure.
So I try to develop, excuse me, a relationship with all my clients to be like, listen,
Right.
this is how I would do this. This is how I would want to be advised to do this. Again, just to be transparent. Sometimes people do not understand. So we try to, I try to compare this as the book, Green Eggs and Ham.
Yes.
You know, a while back when we were starting off, when me and my business partner starting off, we had a client actually give us a presentation on their book of how things can be pitched, delivered, right? And that stuck with me for till now. You know, I always
Right.
tell people, even though there's a certain way that we want to do things, and it's kind of like going also like a really good connection to adapting to a client, but how we explain, right? If somebody has more experience, let's say in tech, if we're building an application, how we explain what we do and what is the outcome might sound different than somebody that doesn't have that experience. So we have to figure out that language, right? Figure out how they want to be communicated to make sure that it makes sense so that our process, the way that the project management manager leads, gets them to that final outcome that they desire, but also not what they're assuming, but what both of us are expecting.
Got it. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. All right. Let's talk about the current battleground, because 2025 is wild for agencies, right? You've got AI tools. There's offshore competition at fraction of the cost. Founders learning to their own SEO on YouTube. Meanwhile, MOS Creative is charging premium rates for custom development. So, what's your defensive moat? How do you justify premium pricing when someone can build good enough with no code tools for, I don't know, 20% of your fee?
I'll tell you, that's a really good question. I don't think AI is going to take away, definitely not for development. I don't think it's actually going to take away the work. I think it's going to add work because more people will be like, I'm able to do this, and they're going to get into it. They're going to create a prototype themselves. AI is still not there to build scalable, really scalable solutions. It's great for you to create a prototype.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Great, great. That's great. So now a founder who has an idea can actually create something, show it to us, so it's easier for us to be able to plan it, help them plan it out of what needs to be done, instead of like, well, here's what I want to do. Well, what do you want to do? I want to build a Facebook. Which version of Facebook? Facebook when they started, Facebook, like 5 years later, Facebook now, right? So I think it's going to help to be able to understand, for them to understand really what they want to build, right? For us as a company to be able to understand and help them lead to where it needs to be.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I agree with you there. I agree with that. Because I don't think that um, there should be no excuse now for a founder not to actually go out and raise funds from investors without having a finished product or a demo product that can actually go, because they can build that themselves. They can go right here, rather than saying, right, I need to raise funds to be able to build my demo.
right.
They can actually build the demo at a fraction of a cost to go, right, this is my demo. This is what I need the money for, to have a team to be able to, or have an agency to build it out properly with
Yeah.
all the belts and braces, right? So I agree with you there.
I mean,
Okay, let's
I've
go on.
always said this to founders, any founders that I've worked with, I always told them, you can't just go to an investor. I mean, this is not Silicon Valley. You can't just go to an investor and be like, oh, here's my idea. Unless you have really good past experience or a good connection with somebody that they're like, hey, you trust me. I know I can do this, and they trust you. You have to at least have a clickable prototype to show them, here's
I
what my
agree.
idea is. Because the way you might pitch them, to you, it might make perfect sense because you went over several times in your head, 100 times in your head. But to them, it might be like, hold on a second, I'm seeing it from this perspective, right?
Yes.
You might be pitching it from this perspective. Again, it's that green eggs and ham type of
Yep.
scenario.
Yeah, no, I get it. Let's talk SEO specifically, because everyone and their cousin is doing SEO now, right? It's commoditized, right? So what do you do differently that actually compounds results? Because saying we do SEO isn't a differentiation anymore.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, what are we doing differently? So, yes, you can, create a whole bunch of content. A lot of people don't know that if you're creating content, so I mean, obviously, we're using AI tools to speed up the process of ideation, some of the content creation, but you then have to take the content. You got to make sure you clean it to make sure there's no watermarks from, like, say, ChatGPT, right? Because it leaves watermarks. Then, making sure I mean, SEO doesn't really, it creates the content for you, but it doesn't always tell you, hey, here's your top competitors, right? Within search, AI search, Google Maps, and how and what do you need to do different in order to stand out. That's still that strategy component is not really there. It's more of implementation, right? It might tell you, like for example, even if you take a website and put it into ChatGPT, it might tell you some of the information, but not always very specific what needs to be done. Number one. Number two is, even if you created that content, it doesn't actually help. Like, let's say blogs. Everybody knows you write blogs, it helps you get ranked, and then there's an internal link within the blog to the actual product page, service page, whatever. Majority of the people, I would say 90% of people, maybe even higher, write blogs just to write blogs. A lot of times they write and pray that it shows up somewhere, not even on the first page. Hopefully it's on the first page. A lot of times when we do blogging specifically to have blog be ranked on first page and higher, and also be shown in AI search, we test it. So we can know
Right.
a result. If the client's fine with this process, we explain to them the process. Then we test it within usually of us launching that blog. We know if it's ranking on the first page and in AI search or not. So we're not wasting time. It's a more systematic approach. That's one. Number two is like, why, like, if you're writing a blog, that blog or that content, or if you're creating PDF for it or some kind of information, right, about a product or service, it should be ranking not just in regular search and Google search. You should be ranking in AI search as well. So when we're doing this, we're structuring it how AI expects to see it. We're structuring how Google wants to see it. So it's helping a website. But obviously, listen, traffic doesn't always mean that you're going to get more sales, more conversions.
Sure.
It's also then about testing and making
Yeah.
sure you're improving the process and seeing, what else needs to be done. Google Maps is completely different. It's changed tremendously. I would say probably in the past quarter. There's a lot more categories, a lot more information needs to be provided.
Yeah. Got it.
So it's just making sure that you're constantly updated as well of what needs to be done, what needs to be updated, where's your competition, right? Having an eye on the competition and how do you stay ahead of them.
Okay. You mentioned um, innovative project planning in your materials. And that phrase actually caught my attention because planning is where most projects fail. They skip it or do it poorly. Um, Give me the one planning step you do that your competitors skip. Like, what's the thing where you're like, if we don't do this, the project's going to derail?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Planning is probably the most critical part of the full project because so the analogy I use, planning is like when you're trying to build a house before you go to developer to actually construct the house, to develop the house, you go to the engineer and architect to create a blueprint. That's what the part of the planning is. Yes, you can build a prototype within AI. Great. We've had clients before they came to us, like, the military family application moving application that I was telling you. The client was very prepared. Once we reviewed everything, we're like, well, do you need everything? And why do you need everything? Because your user probably is not going to need everything right away. Let's think about how to plan for the things that have the immediate effect, immediate problem that you can fix, and then start adding from there. So planning is to lead them through this process to make sure that what one or several features really, really fix or attempt to fix the problem that they're going after, going to create overall good solution, good user experience for desired user, and then start adding additional stuff. And then also, biggest part of the planning is, as I mentioned, to take out assumptions. You won't believe how many times the client talks to us or to another uh, agency, another developer, and then they're like, well, I want to build, again, just using an example, I want to build a Facebook. Well, to that developer's mind, right, Facebook might have certain features. They might be thinking of today's Facebook. To the client, they might be thinking initial Facebook when they were just
Yes.
starting off.
Yeah.
That's two assumptions. The planning is what's supposed to really take out all of the assumptions and clarify and say, here's the expectations, here's written and designed or whatever flow or UI prototype that's shown how it's going to flow so that we're on the same page.
Yeah.
And then
Okay.
from there, you lead to the next, next
Yeah.
step.
That makes sense. Okay, Max, we're coming up on time. But I want to pull this together. You've been doing this for 20 years. You've seen hundreds, probably thousands of businesses who try to scale digitally. Some 10x, most stay stuck. But based on everything you've seen, what's the pattern when you look at a company's website, their app strategy, their SEO approach? What are the two or three indicators that immediately tell you they're either going to explode or they're going to plateau?
Hmm. That's I don't think the website sometimes or the app is really what's going to tell if they're going to explode or plateau. Again, I think it's the founder, the team itself, very, very important. I've seen very poor websites and applications and software if it's a tech company, and I've seen the team, they just knew how to be able to, number one, build this illusion if they were raising money or getting users to believe in them and then to improve, right? So it's not always like I have to have a perfect product. 'Cause there's no perfect product. In your mind, it might be perfect. There's many users like I like this, but I don't like that, right? So it's never a perfect product. So it's really just the best thing is the simplest thing for everyone, right? Is to take certain use case, right? Very small use case, and be able to prove with them, have that perfect product market fit. I think the biggest issue is that too many startups, if we're talking about specifically startups, uh, they try to go, yes, their solution could potentially be a solution for everyone, but they try to go to too many different use cases, two different type of clients, and they miss the opportunity to really solve the problem for all of them, or they just touch the surface. So focus, I think, is very, very important. Obviously, don't get me wrong. Listen, if they're focusing and that audience that they're focusing on is not the right fit, and then they see opportunity, I've seen this as well, and you have to be open to it. This is what I was saying. Don't fall in love with just one type of solution,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
that solution is not working, right? And it's very hard because certain people just they get like, no, no, I get tunnel vision, right? But you hear like, oh, hey, this your product, your offer really is good for me. And if that's a perfect product market fit, you have to be able to be open to it.
yeah. No, that makes sense. Okay, so here's a fun one, okay, for you, Max. If you are starting MOS Creative today in 2025, not 2005, what would you do differently in year one? And what would you know now that would change your approach?
If I had this experience or starting completely from scratch with no experience.
Well, no. So you've got a chance to do a do-over, right? And you got to start MOS Creative today, and you've learned quite a bit. But what would you do differently?
It's an interesting question. Well, I think it's very different to date, obviously, when I started, because also how we're connected through technology. Like you're able to get an amazing, let's say, for example, for development, I can get an amazing developer that doesn't have to be close to me. They can work remotely in another state, another city, you know. So I think just really being adaptable, right?
Right.
Obviously, you can never take away, listen to the customers that you're targeting. Like, who are you trying to work with? Like, for example, the some of the industries that we have on the website that we worked with, it's not that we've specifically like, okay, you know what, we're gonna work again with this military family moving application. That wasn't our focus. We found the common denominator there is we're very good in building marketplaces, and a lot of these applications are marketplaces. Yes, they're serving a different industry in a way, right? Like I guess it's military family, social media applications to a certain extent, moving, right? There's certain categories, but the common denominator amongst all of those is most of the applications that we built for these companies were marketplaces because there was an exchange, right? With this military moving application, somebody trying to move, connecting to somebody where they're moving to. There's a realtor, there's a lender, right? There's other
Got it.
parties involved. So that's what if that answers your question.
Yeah, yeah, it does. Okay, so last question, okay, and I ask this to everyone. One growth principle you'd tell every founder trying to scale their business right now? What is it?
One grace principle.
One growth principle for growth. Yeah.
Growth principle. Okay, I didn't hear the
Yeah, yeah,
growth.
yeah.
Know your numbers. I think that's a critical. I think our the startup world, especially on the West Coast in Silicon Valley, was too, um, too excited about getting investment, not really thinking about the numbers, the expenses, the investment they needed to go into it. Perfect example. I mean, we've never raised money for this company. For the other company, we did raise money, the one that for mobile website builder.
Hmm.
But MOS Creative never raised money. Mailchimp, right? Never raised money. It was actually a digital agency. They
Right.
started doing email
Yeah, yeah,
services for their clients, build a platform, sold for what, like 4 billion to
yeah.
Intuit, 6 billion, something like that. So if you know your numbers, right, and be like very specific with it, not just like, it's okay, I'm going to raise some more money, because I've seen founders that have raised money. Yes, they've sold maybe for 100 million, 200 million, but when you got a lot of investors, it's not about what you raise, right? It's about what you keep. If you're only going to keep, a million from that, right? I'd
Yeah.
rather work for myself, not have this type of growth, and just less stress.
Fair enough. Less stress is the word. Okay, Max, this has been excellent. 20 years of pattern recognition compressed into 20 minutes or half an hour. So where can people experience your work and connect with you directly?
Yeah, they can check us out on our website, www.moscreative.com. They can find me also on LinkedIn under Max Kryzhanovskiy. We're all over the web, so they can definitely find us online if they have any questions or want to connect.
Great. Well, I'll put that in the show notes anyway, and that's perfect for everyone listening. If you got value from this, you know what to do. Share it with the founder who needs to hear it. Max, appreciate you coming on. Thanks for tuning in to Propellant Growth Podcast. Until next time, stay sharp, stay strategic.
Thank you.